Imagine finding out that the Chinese automaker behind your car just declared bankruptcy. Production stopped overnight, and your dealer vanished without warning. Your warranty is worthless, parts are impossible to find, and your car's resale value just dropped to scrap metal prices. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. It's happening right now across China and spreading to global markets where these brands are expanding. Today, we're counting down the 6 Chinese car brands that are collapsing or already dead, leaving owners stranded with vehicles nobody wants to buy. Whether it's because of bankruptcy, fraudulent practices, or simply getting crushed by the brutal competition. And here's the most shocking part. The #1 brand on this list is still expanding globally, still building new showrooms, still taking deposits, while burning through $1. $5 billion every single quarter with no path to profitability. Stay until the end, because what dealers aren't telling you could save you from a financial disaster. Let's get started. Let's start with the brand that promised to be China's music. Tesla raised billions from investors and collapsed without delivering a single car to customers. Byton. Coming in at number 6 is Byton, the Chinese electric vehicle startup that was supposed to revolutionize the automotive industry with its massive 48-inch dashboard screen, luxury SUV design, and Silicon Valley innovation. The promise was simple: combine German engineering with Chinese manufacturing efficiency and American tech vision to create the ultimate smart vehicle. On paper, the idea was revolutionary. They hired executives from BMW, Tesla, and Apple. They raised over $8 billion from investors. They built a massive factory in Nanjing, capable of producing 300,000 vehicles annually. They showcased concept vehicles at CES that generated massive buzz. Automotive journalists called the M-Byte SUV the future of mobility. Pre-orders flooded in. Everything looked perfect, but here's the brutal reality. Not a single production vehicle was ever delivered to a paying customer. Zero. After 6 years of operation, billions in investment, and countless promises, Byton collapsed in 2022 without producing anything beyond prototype vehicles and flashy concept cars. The company declared bankruptcy, laid off all employees, shuttered the factory, and left investors and depositors with nothing. The warning signs were everywhere, but people ignored them. Production was supposed to start in 2019, then delayed to 2020, then 2021, then indefinitely postponed. The company kept burning through cash with no revenue. Executive turnover was constant. Co-founder Carsten Breitfeld left in 2020. Manufacturing partner FAW pulled out. Investors stopped funding additional rounds. By 2020, Byton couldn't pay employee salaries, and the factory sat idle. Workers protested outside headquarters demanding back pay. Suppliers sued for unpaid bills totaling hundreds of millions. The fundamental problem was that Byton spent billions on marketing, showrooms, and hype, but couldn't actually build a functional production vehicle. The 48-inch screen they showcased at CES failed regulatory approval in multiple markets for being too distracting. The luxury interior they promised was too expensive to manufacture profitably. The battery technology was not developed in-house, and they couldn't secure supply contracts. The manufacturing partnership with FAW fell apart when FAW realized Byton had no viable path to production. In 2021, Taiwanese contract manufacturer Foxconn attempted to rescue Byton with a $200 million investment and manufacturing partnership. That deal collapsed within a year when Foxconn discovered the extent of Byton's technical and financial problems. The company officially entered bankruptcy proceedings in 2022. The Nanjing factory was sold off to pay creditors, equipment was auctioned. The brand assets were acquired by investors who haven't announced any revival plans. Here's what this means for anyone who put down a deposit or bought into the Byton story. Your money is gone. Deposits were never refunded. Investors lost everything. The vehicles showcased at auto shows will never be produced. If you somehow acquired a Byton prototype vehicle through auctions or secondary channels, you own an orphan product with 0 parts availability, 0 service network, and 0 resale value. Byton isn't just dead. It never truly lived beyond flashy presentations and empty promises. If a Chinese startup is showing concept cars, making big promises, and delaying production repeatedly, run the other direction. If you think that collapse was dramatic, The next brand proves you can actually die twice in the automotive industry. Borgward. At number 5, we have Borgward, a brand with one of the strangest and most fraudulent comeback stories in automotive history. Borgward was originally a German automaker that went bankrupt in 1961 after years of financial mismanagement. The brand sat dead for 54 years until 2015, when Chinese company Foton Motor acquired the naming rights and announced Borgward's music revival. The pitch was compelling. Revive a historic German luxury brand, engineer vehicles in Germany, manufacture them in China, and sell them globally as affordable German luxury. Chinese buyers have immense respect for German engineering, so a German badge manufactured in China seemed like the perfect formula. The problem? None of it was real. Borgward vehicles weren't engineered in Germany. They were designed by a Chinese engineering firm with minimal German input. The brand had no connection to the original Borgward company beyond buying the name. It was essentially a Chinese automaker wearing German branding as a costume, but marketing sold the illusion successfully. Borgward launched the BX5 and BX7 SUVs in China in 2016 with decent initial sales. They expanded to European markets in 2018, opening dealerships in Germany, Belgium, and other countries. They announced plans for electric vehicles. Everything looked promising on the surface. Then reality hit. In 2019, just 4 years after the revival, Borgward entered insolvency proceedings in Germany. European sales had completely collapsed. Only 1,200 vehicles were sold across all European markets in 2019, a catastrophic failure. Dealerships closed almost immediately. The promised EV lineup never materialized. Production in China continued briefly, but sales plummeted as Chinese music consumers realized they'd been sold an expensive fake German brand when they could buy actual Chinese brands for less money or real German brands for similar prices. By 2020, Borgward China also filed for bankruptcy. The parent company, Foton Motor, had poured over $2 billion into the revival and saw almost none of it back. Production stopped completely. The factory in Beijing was sold off. Remaining inventory sat unsold. In 2021, an investor group attempted another revival with plans for electric vehicles, but that effort has produced nothing beyond press releases. As of 2025, Borgward is effectively dead for the second time. Here's the disaster for owners. If you bought a Borgward in China or Europe between 2016 and 2020, you now own an orphan vehicle from a twice-dead brand. Parts availability is minimal. The dealer network is gone. Resale values are non-existent because nobody wants to buy a vehicle from a defunct brand with no support infrastructure. Warranty claims are worthless because there's no company to honor them. Some owners in Europe reported being unable to get basic service within a year of purchase because dealerships had already closed. The lesson? When a Chinese company buys a dead European brand and claims to be reviving German engineering, it's almost always a scam designed to fool consumers with badge snobbery. Borgward collapsed twice. It won't get a third chance. If you see a used Borgward for sale at a tempting price, understand that you're buying a parts-unavailable orphan with zero resale value. It's not a bargain, it's a money pit. That was fraud disguised as revival. But the next brand shows what happens when aggressive European expansion meets financial reality. Aways. Number 4 is Aways, a Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer that launched in 2017 with aggressive plans to dominate European markets. Unlike many Chinese startups, Aways actually produced and delivered vehicles. Their U5 electric SUV launched in 2020 and was sold across multiple European countries, including Germany, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Switzerland. On paper, the U5 offered compelling value. A mid-size electric SUV with 400 kilometers of range for under 40,000 euros, significantly cheaper than European competitors. Initial reviews were mixed but acknowledged the value proposition. But behind the scenes, Aways was hemorrhaging money. The company never disclosed detailed financial figures because Chinese private companies aren't required to, but industry insiders estimated losses exceeding $500 million annually. Manufacturing costs were too high, sales volumes were too low, and the company had massively overestimated European demand. In 2021, Aways sold approximately 15,000 vehicles across all markets, nowhere near the volume needed for profitability. By 2022, sales had collapsed to under 8,000 music units. The company desperately needed additional funding rounds to survive, but investors had lost confidence. In early 2023, Aways halted production at its factory in Jiangxi province, citing supply chain issues. Music that was corporate speak for "we've run out of money and can't pay suppliers." European deliveries stopped immediately. Dealerships were left with unsold inventory and no way to get more vehicles. Customers who had placed deposits for the upcoming U6 SUV saw their orders canceled without refunds. By mid-2023, Aways officially declared bankruptcy in Europe and withdrew from all European markets. Music, the Chinese operations, entered bankruptcy proceedings shortly after. Here's the nightmare for European owners. Thousands of customers across Europe now own Aways U5 vehicles with no manufacturer support. The warranty is worthless. Parts availability is minimal and expensive because they must be imported from China with no official distribution channel. Software updates stopped, leaving vehicles frozen with whatever firmware version they had at bankruptcy. Charging infrastructure partnerships were canceled, meaning some owners lost access to music discounted charging networks they signed up for through Aways. If you're considering buying a used Aways because the price looks attractive, Music understand what you're actually buying. An orphaned electric vehicle with limited parts, zero software music support, and resale value that can only go lower. It's not a bargain, it's a financial trap. Now we're getting into brands that were actually successful before collapsing, which makes their failure even more shocking. WM Motor, Weltmeister. At number 3, we have WM Motor, also known internationally as Weltmeister, a Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer that was once ranked among the top 5 EV makers in China. This wasn't a startup with grand promises and no product. WM Motor actually produced and delivered over 80,000 vehicles between 2018 and 2022. Their X5 electric SUV was a bestseller in China's competitive EV market. The company raised over $5 billion from investors, including Baidu, Tencent, and major Chinese investment firms. They built a massive factory in Wenzhou with 200,000 unit annual capacity. They were positioned as a serious competitor to NIO, XPeng, and Li Auto in China's premium EV segment. The brutal truth is that music, despite selling 80,000 vehicles, WM Motor lost money on every single unit. The company was burning through approximately $400 million annually with no path to profitability. Manufacturing costs were too high, vehicle pricing was too low to compete, and operating expenses spiraled out of control. The company attempted an IPO in 2021 to raise additional capital, but the application was rejected by Chinese regulators, citing financial irregularities and sustainability concerns. Music. By 2022, warning signs were everywhere. Employee salaries were delayed multiple times. Suppliers weren't being paid, with some owed over 100 million yuan. Production slowed significantly, with the factory operating at under 30% capacity. In late 2022, WM Motor defaulted on debt payments totaling 2 billion yuan. Banks initiated legal proceedings. In October 2023, the company officially entered bankruptcy proceedings. The founder and CEO Freeman Shen stepped down. The Wenzhou factory suspended operations. Approximately 10,000 employees were laid off without severance pay. Here's the disaster unfolding for owners. Over 80,000 WM Motor vehicles are now on Chinese roads with no manufacturer support. The warranty is void. Software updates stopped, meaning vehicles are frozen with outdated firmware that can't be upgraded. Some owners reported that advanced features like autonomous parking and adaptive cruise control stopped working because cloud-connected services were shut down. Parts availability is becoming a serious problem. While third-party repair shops can handle some basic maintenance, specialized components like battery management systems, motor controllers, and electronic modules are extremely difficult or impossible to source. Charging network partnerships were canceled. WM Motor had agreements with several charging providers for discounted rates. Those deals ended with bankruptcy, meaning owners now pay full retail